organizations are not, don't have business continuity plans themselves. So a lot of this came together. Canadian organizations across industries face increasing regulatory expectations, cyber risk, and stakeholder demands for accountability. Quite a lot of regulatory expectations. Let me just go back to one. I think I went down. So the webinar demonstrates 3 globally respected frameworks, which we've already covered, but it's about strengthening risk maturity, aligning with global standards, not just Canadian, and enhancing decision-making, which is a problem when you don't have all of the information from all of the areas. So some of the agenda we'll be covering are exploring the management of framework, understanding the 3100, the 31,000. By the way, I teach the 31000, and it is interesting how many people that are risk managers are not familiar with it. When they take it or study it, they say, wow, this is an important course. So we'll be comparing the COSO, the MOR, the ISO 3100. We'll integrate frameworks into business strategy, practical applications, business response, reporting, and case studies. We have 1 hour to teach you all of this. So if you don't have it all memorized by the end of the 1 hour, I certainly would understand that. But please take notes. I will be available at the end to answer any questions. I know we got a little bit late start, so I'll take the hour if that's okay. And then we will continue answering those questions. So some of the risk frameworks, I just want you to understand what we're looking at. COSO sets principles for effective risk management, but it also deals with the internal controls, and that helps a lot with your audit. It helps organizations achieve directives, objectives, and manage uncertainties. Risk is all about uncertainties. We have internal risk, we have external risk, we have so many that and sometimes with a risk can come opportunities, but this identifies all of those areas. So the more structured approach is a very structured risk assessment. It's clear communication. It has mitigation strategies included, and particularly in project environments. And I just finished teaching a project management certification course, and it is a challenge for a lot of project managers who have not taken classes, whether you're a PMP, whether you're certified in the ISO for project management. Project management is different than managing in general. It's not about just managing the people, it's managing the time, the scope, the how fast we have to have it done, what's included in that, and how much it's going to cost us. So all of this is very structured in that approach. The 31,000 integrates integration of risk management to business processes. It promotes informed decision-making. How do we make sure that everybody who has to have information actually understands the risk, not just knows them, but understands the risk and what the impacts are? And it's organizational resiliency. There's no reason you can't combine these. It is certainly allowable, or you may want to treat each one individually. So understanding enterprise risk management. We'll be defining the scope. So it's coordinated risk management. It's taking the cybersecurity, the business continuity, the operational risk. It's looking at opportunity risk that you might be missing. It's looking at the risk from all different angles, including what if we're not first to market? Recently, one of the top software companies just said that they don't care if they have a few errors in the processing. They're more interested in making sure that they're first to market because they want to get the information out there immediately before their competitors. So it's a risk for them if they are not out there by a certain date. Now they realize that there are operational risk associated, that there are financial risk associated with it, but they're willing to absorb those. They actually said they're fine if it costs them even several million to $1 billion extra to be able to become first in market in order to mitigate the risk as best they can and then fix the ones that they couldn't mitigate. That's one approach. Comprehensive risk management. Remember, I'm not saying it's the approach. It's an approach of there was a decision that was made informed, and that's what the head of their company decided. And they actually put it out in a press conference last week. Comprehensive risk coverage. It covers strategic, operational, financial, and compliance risk. If you do not deal with strategy, you're not going to be first to market. You're not going to stay in market. If you have operational risk, that could be affected from anything. There was just a company outside of Canada that laid off 525 people yesterday because the visas that they had were no longer valid. This particular country did not have the expertise that these people who had been there for years as contractors had. They knew the product line, they knew everything. Now they knew that this was a risk, but they felt that the compliance risk was more important because they would be incurring fines. So they decided they would lay off the 525 people. They put out a press release right away, so it did not affect their image as well. And they explained the reasons why. Otherwise, people say, oh, what a terrible company. What a terrible company. I'm not going to buy from them. But they wanted, so they dealt with the public relations, is everything, all these different areas. So the objective of risk management is you want to protect your assets. And an asset is anything that the organization deems important, in summary. It's physical assets and intangible. Reputation's an intangible asset. You lose your reputation, you could be out of business. You definitely have people outside your businesses. If it's a building itself, they're outside your business or outside your headquarters with signs complaining. So the potential threats and losses, we don't even know what the actual threats and losses are, but this is done quantitatively and qualitatively. So regulatory compliance, these are the laws and regulations to avoid penalties and maintain organizational integrity. And some people say we're going to accept the penalties. It's worth it for us to be able to get out to a market to keep our customers going. We'll make changes later. However, they want to maintain the organizational integrity. It has to be with what the organization deems most important and what their ethics are, what their values are. So in others, they say, no, we're going to follow the laws and regulations. We do not want penalties. We want a reputation for being an honest and ethical company that follows the rules. And there's different organizations. I'm not saying which one is better. I'm saying from it's a value of the companies and what the level of their ethics are and what they deem more important. Improved decision-making. Management supports informed decision by identifying and evaluating the potential risk management does rather. And those numbers are presented to management, to all the decision makers. Organizational resiliency is the ability to adapt and recover from uncertainties. Now you've got business continuity, but you also have situations going way back, way back, where Tylenol, they had a good reputation because they did have some problems with their products being tampered. They immediately put out press releases. They held conferences, press conferences. They also made sure they pulled everything off the market immediately. Other organizations have pulled things off the market quietly, but they felt that it would be more of a disruption to their and more of a risk for them to announce to people that this was a problem they had made in the first place. Again, these are decisions that each manager makes. And although we're talking about Canada, if you have an international company, do realize that different countries have different aspects, and may have management decision makers who, if you're an international corporation, have decision makers in different countries. And I've worked around the world. I've been very blessed. I've worked in different parts of Africa. I have worked in Asia. I've worked in the Middle East. And the decisions around risk management are different based on the corporations, not so much the locations that they're in, which is interesting. So you can't say, well, this is where our people are going to be. This is probably where they're going to be decision making. Not necessarily. It's based on the industry more so. So benefits are a strong risk management framework. Loss reduction. If you take a good, let's just take your house, for instance. If you know you have a leak, that's a risk. Well, it's a risk of the water getting damaged. It's a risk of your furniture getting damaged. It's a risk to the property, but it's also a risk that it might get worse. And as it gets worse, the cost might go higher. So we deal with risk all the time in our lives, but we don't think about it as much as that way when we're working in a risk management environment. And my MBA is in risk management, and I'm very honored. I graduated with the highest grade point average for the school. I had a 3.8. And what was interesting is that was the highest hard graders. But so what happened was somebody said, how did you do so well how did you do your MBA while working full time? I said, because I kept thinking about it, not as my company that I had experience with. What if I was with many, many different types of companies? How would I answer this differently? So that's important. The support strategic. Remember, loss could be loss of finances. It could be loss of life, which we certainly want to protect. We're taught that the loss of life is the first thing we consider as a must. The next thing, and that's in many of the classes that you'll see out there. The other thing that's important is you may have public relations risk. You may have loss of the ability to work within certain countries because you didn't comply with their laws or their rules and regulations. So you've lost an entire market. So you're supporting strategic goals. Effective risk management aligns with supports achievement of your strategic goals. It promotes stakeholder confidence, and it improves resilience allocation. We work with products and with companies that we trust. If they have a bad reputation, we don't feel comfortable working with them as a whole. We being the world. I don't use the word we as in you and I, but we as in the world have it. It's statistically shown that once someone has lost confidence or faith in an organization, they are less likely to do business with that organization again. So let's do the COSO framework. So it was developed by a committee of sponsoring organizations to enhance organizational governance. It introduced a framework to improve internal controls environments for better reliability and compliance. It evolved to include enterprise risk management to help organizations identify and manage risk enterprise-wise. But it started out only to deal with the internal controls. So the core components of the framework are control environment. So it sets the tone for risk management and the ethical behavior throughout the organization. Please remember, ethics are very important because the ethics are decided within an organization from the top. If management says this is not, yes, we realize that we're not following the rules and regulations. We know we're taking a risk, but that's what we want to do. The employees who stay in the organization are going to follow that. The employees who don't agree with that may leave their jobs. But it's a matter of aligning, but it's the ethical behavior of the organization, what they do, and that is the tone for risk management, what their values are. And we don't mean ethical mean not legal, but in some cases they may be doing something that another person in another environment may not consider ethical, but it is legal. So risk assessment, identify and analyze risks that could affect the objectives to guide management actions. What are our objectives this year? Do we want to be first to market? Do we want to open 20 new stores? Are we going to close 20 to open 40 in different locations? That's a risk because the people in those 20 locations are going to say, you abandoned us. But the people in the 40 locations, we now have to deal with the risk from a public relations point of view also of ensuring that they don't feel we're going to leave them. It's just that we didn't have enough clients in those 20 locations that we closed the stores in. So control activities, that's a way you control it. You're mitigating risk and ensuring directives. How do we deal with public relations is a great way to control activities also with mitigating risk. And that's something that a lot of people forget within the COSO framework. They're just looking at how do we mitigate cyber risk, how do we mitigate IT risk, how do we mitigate business continuity, but public relations, image, tangible, legal liabilities, loss of customers, those are all risks, intangible, but they must be considered. Information and communication. How are we going to identify, capture, and communicate across timely across the organization? AI becomes an issue. There have been organizations that are collecting data from past from clients and such, trying to make sure that they can help with the decision making, but they did not have sign-in. They were working in, maybe they had international and they weren't complying with GDPR. Perhaps they were collecting information that Canada does not allow from the privacy point of view. Remember, Canada's coming up with the AI. They have the new AI standard that's coming out. It's already been out, but it's improving. And so that is important to look at and consider. Monitoring activities. So you're monitoring to make sure the effectiveness of your controls over time. That's metrics. Metrics are usually numbers or a percentage. And you have to know what metrics you want to collect so it's not randomly. And are they worthwhile metrics to collect? And does management agree? So the COSO's approach to risk management and control is pretty simple. They do risk identification, risk assessment, control implementation, and continuous monitoring. I would go through and define these each for you and spend more time, but this would be a whole day workshop. So we'll keep it to the hour, but I'll ask you to read those. So risk identification, what risk do we have? How do we assess the risk? How do we prioritize which ones we're going to work on first because I can't work on them all? How do we control implementation? How do we make sure that we have objectives and enhance the organizational resiliency? And continuous monitoring. Who's keeping the metrics? Who's reviewing the metrics? So exploring risk management framework, this is more. So we'll do a little bit, it's a structured risk management, very structured. It's access to identity, assess, and manage risk within the organization effectively. It promotes accountability and transparency among all organization levels to ensure proper risk oversight. By the way, the AI requirements for Canada, so you must have transparency. So this certainly would meet those requirements also when if you're dealing with AI as part of your processes. It promotes accountability and transparency. Absolutely the important to remember. It has principles and processes and more. The core principles are risk identification, stakeholder involvement, which we haven't had in the other one, COSO. Here you have all your stakeholders. Stakeholders are not only your customers, but it's also everyone that might be interested, including your neighbors. If you're building a nuclear plant, your neighbors next door are going to be stakeholders. If you have a regulated industry, the regulators are going to be stakeholders. So it becomes very broad. Risk identification and evaluation. The process steps with starting to risk through evaluation to understand the potential impacts. Knowing the risk without knowing the potential impacts is going to be needless, according to MOR. Yes, I know that at any time in the world, my roof might leak at some point over the next so many years. What do I do to mitigate it? I have a guaranteed when I bought my new roof, I made sure it was good for 20 years, but I'm already on now year 19, giving an example. So what's the risk? Do I want to put the new roof in now? Do I want to wait? What's the impact if I wait? We do these things all the time in our thinking process. But when we say it's more, people get, oh my gosh, that's so confusing. It's not. It's the same thing as think about your roof and it's 19 years. What's the probability of that risk happening this year? Risk response and monitoring. Implementing responses to risk and continuous monitoring to manage changes. So that would be similar to if there was a risk happening, how do we mitigate it riskily? And do we evaluate as new risk occur in the organization? So the role in organizational governance is defining roles and responsibilities. Who's accountable in the organizational governance frameworks? You have a risk-aware culture. The entire organization is aware of risk, and many organizations have little. If you see a risk, let us know. Even if you, no matter what level you're on, if you're a manufacturing firm and you happen to be somebody on the line and you think there's a risk, we want you to point it out. Every single person in the organization is possibly someone who's going to notice a risk that somebody else didn't. Everybody's empowered to, at least to the risk culture, to identify something and report it to someone higher up. Aligning risk with objectives that's aligned with the overall organization's objective to support governance. I had one organization, which was a bank, and what they did was wonderful. They put up a video, very simple old technology, put up a video and had it in the entrance to the building. So as every employee came in for a week, it was saying how important it was to identify risk, how important it was to identify how the company was organized, and making sure that they felt that this was governance was an aspect of it, so they could make sure that they, when managing, they knew who was responsible for what, and you would have a list of who to report what to if there was a problem. Very organized. So you're understanding 3100, Global Standard for Risk Management. It's development and evolution. So it is, we're created to unify various international risk management standards into one. So it's looking at ISO 27005, which is risk management from a cyber point of view. It's looking at environmental risk. It's how to bring everything together. What should you do regardless of which standards you're using? What are the basics? But it evolved from previous guidelines to offer a comprehensive and adaptable approach. This is very adaptable. It is not as standardized as MOR. It's very adaptable. It provides flexible framework for suitable various industries. You can adjust how you're doing it. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that either of these are better. They're just different. So core principles 31,000 emphasizes integration, structured approach. It still has a structured approach, but it's flexible based on the size of the organization, based on what your needs are. Right now, this may be more important. Later on, that may be more important. It's customization and improved to effective risk management. So it deals with continuous improvement or continuous non-ending improvement. There's a term for that. It's called KNEI, K-N-E-I, continuous non-ending improvement. So it's ongoing evaluation, not once a year, not twice a year, but it is ongoing. You're continuously assessing your risk. You may be doing it on a monthly basis. You may be doing it on a quarterly basis. That would be considered continuum. The adaptation to change. The standard ensures organizations adapt risk practices for internal and external. This is the first time we're talking about external. The other words, possibly including it in COSO, possibly including it in MOR. MOR was originally set up just for internal. I'm sorry, COSO was originally set up just for internal risk. Now they're looking at external. But this is set up originally from these. And in order to have an ISO, 160 member countries have to agree on it, to say, yes, this works in our country. So it's much more, it's used a lot for global organizations, but I also like to use it for a non-global. Refinement of practices, it's continuous refining practices. What's working, what's not working, who else needs to be involved? Where are we going? It's constant project management, constant. Well, you can't say constant because a project has a start and an end, but it is using the project management skills you have, even though it's not a project. It is an ongoing process. So we're going to compare these very quickly. So just a summary here. So they're structured risk frameworks. All frameworks promote a structured approach or systematic approach, if you will. They align with objectives and they have continuous evaluation. So you can combine the three together within one organization by creating your own framework of combined. Most organizations don't because it's a little more complicated. It can be a lot more complicated, but it is a possibility. So the next thing is key differences. I'm sorry? Somebody asked me a question? Okay, but somebody say something. Key differences and unique elements. You have success, support, strategy, goals, skill, partnership. Notice the key difference and unique elements between these. So COSO emphasizes prioritizing strong internal controls. It still does. Risk management effectively with organizations. MOR emphasizes governance structure and accountability to risk. ISO 3100 has both a broad global risk management principles adaptable across various industries. 3100 covers governance, risk, and compliance issues associated with that. So, but they all do on some level, but this is much more emphasis on it. So choosing the right approach for your business, and there is no right approach for all business. Each one is different. And I do use all three depending on which client I'm serving. I have a consulting firm, Redmond Worldwide, and I do consulting and I do audits, including certification audits. And it is very important for me to decide which approach do they like, and also which approach would fit that organization better if they don't have one in place. And I work with them on that. That's part of the governance. So they look at the size of the organization, the industry considerations, because they have unique challenges and regulations. Regulatory compliance needs makes certainly a very big difference because you do want to ensure compliance and reduce legal risk. And you want the risk maturity level. How advanced are they on their risk management process? Are they just starting out, or where are we going? Let me just check my time here, so we're okay. And so we will be going a little bit over because we started a little bit late. So digital solutions and risk management, centralized risk management, process automation, and real time. So you integrate the frameworks into your strategy. So it's part of your everyday process. Early risk identification, proactive risk management. It's dealing with risk-aware culture, we've discussed, open communication. Anyone that sees a risk can identify it and bring it out. They don't have to be afraid of saying that this might be a risk. They're not afraid of retaliation. Accountability and risk management, who is responsible? And it is very, very, any risks that are out there, if organizations make mistakes and such, especially if you're using AI, you're required to be able to have it so that that information is reported in Canada. So setting risk appetite and tolerance. You don't have to report the risk. You do have to report it if you feel that there's going to be, if the risk has been, your mitigation didn't work. So risk appetite definition, tolerance level importance, and guiding decision making. So there's practical applications. Continuous employee training is a must. You have new employees coming in all the time. And as the company grows more in their risk management program, you want to have more advanced training. So it helps with if everyone is looking for risk, everyone is identifying risk, it makes it a lot easier not to miss something. Open culture, going back with the roof. If I have a small child and they're in their bedroom, they don't tell me they have a leak, I may not notice it, but if they tell me, they're taught to say, if there's a leak in your room, tell me immediately, not in the morning. Okay, so everybody's been trained. Open communication culture is important. Proactive risk management, so that you come up with strategies to be able to remain secure. If this happens, what can we do? Don't wait till it happens to come up with incident response techniques. But you certainly want to have an incident response plan, but you don't want to wait until the event happens. So incident response planning is also part of your secure and agile in changing markets. So techniques, your brainstorming sessions are great. The problem with a brainstorming session is somebody who's quiet may not get to say what they think. So you have to be very, very careful managing a brainstorming session to make sure that you are dealing with the issues that are most important, to make sure that everybody has a chance to say it. With a brainstorming session, it's called parking lot technique. You write everything on a board. And every idea is considered. Every idea is considered. You don't say, oh, no, that doesn't make sense. We're not going to do that. Oh, no, I don't want to deal with that. You don't? How do you know? We don't even know enough about it. We haven't even looked at the strategies of risk assignment. Everybody just throws out their ideas. Then you do interviews on risk insights, help uncover risk through detailed and structured conversations, very open conversations. When I work with managers, the first thing I like to say is, what keeps you awake at night? What risk has you most worried? And they say, I said, do you have any? Have you thought about risk? Well, of course I've thought about risk. Which one keeps you awake at night? It's AI. Oh, I worry about if we have a cyber event. Oh, I worry about what if we lose our markets? I worry about, so each one's going to have a different answer. So I find that's what my doctorate in psychology helps. I just have conversations. Simple. I don't have, it's just structured. What keeps you awake at night? What makes you nervous? What risk are you most concerned about? Do you have any ideas on how we could mitigate that? Have you seen this in our organization before? How do we deal with it? You're getting part of that. You're looking at it for risk insights, the history. SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. There are opportunities all the time in business. And if you don't consider that, that could also be our strength is such and such, our weakness. We're strong in that we have a great reputation. Our weakness is we're slow to market. We have an opportunity as we get to market first, we might actually be able to build the company. And the threats are we may not be able to deal with a lot of the mistakes that are coming with getting first to market. But it's an opportunity because we know this company just announced what they're going to be doing, what their plans are for this year. Uh, Tesla made announcements of what they were planning on doing. So if you know that a competitor is going to be doing something and they've made a year in advance announcement, that's an opportunity for you to get it first in market, to be in that market at least. So planning scenarios. You just plan for scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if my ceiling falls in? What if I have a tornado and part of my roof goes away? What do we do with those situations? So these are scenarios. So the tools for risk assessment include risk matrices, which is a very good thing for matrix. You know, what do we have to do? It's visually representing likelihood and impact. And today with Excel, it's so easy to be able to do this, even if you don't have advanced tools. You just put it in Excel and you press a button and there your charts pop up. So heat maps. This is high, medium, and low. Usually it's used with yellow if it's very low, green if it's great. Usually it's red if you haven't met the requirement, but I'm also seeing a lot of orange. Orange now is being utilized between the green where it's great, or the well, green would be last. So between the green where there's some risk and red as well. This is really high risk. So you choose the color, you choose the order. Quantitative methods use numerical data, accuracy, and evaluate quantitative risk. Quantitative methods, you're going to see a lot of materials on that around. But there's quantitative and qualitative. Qualitative is what's our image, what's this, but you can also qualify that. How many customers will we lose if we lose our image? How much is that going to cost us? So real world examples of risk assessment, we have threat identification. Organizations can use risk assessment tools to identify potential threats. And I will keep the end time as close to one as possible. So real world examples of risk management. We have threat identification, resource allocation, and enhancing risk. So organizations use risk assessment tools to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities. You don't have to have a tool. You can be using a pen and paper. You can be using Excel. You can be using formulas. You can be using a lot of things that are not an automated tool. So but both are available, and both are, we'll do depending on the size of the organization and the budget of the organization. So resource allocation. And this is for all of them. This is whether you're using COSO, whether you're using MOR, whether you're using 31,000. Enhanced allocation. Risk assessments guide to efficient allocation of resources. Okay, now we're getting into a project management thing. Resources include money, include people, include the locations, as well as others. So where are we going to, what locations do we want to be in? What's going to help us manage this better? We've had problems in the years where people had one data center. Great, we're there, we could all work together, it's wonderful. Then they decided to disperse them around the world. Then they said, oh, we're having problems because we're having trouble connectivity with some of the countries. So all of these things over the years over the last 20 years have evolved. And so now, where do we want to have them? Where are we putting, how are we providing resources? There be more people? Do we have consultants on call? Do we have trained consultants on call where we pay them a premium every year just to come in and be trained on what we do? Or enhance resiliency. So this helps you with resiliency for disruptions, whether the resiliency is public relations, whether it's business continuity, disaster recovery, and AI resiliency has been happening, where we're seeing this information, AI might have been hallucinating it or misunderstanding what it was taught. And no one was checking the end resources of it. They weren't checked because remember, the same person who creates the AI, who programs it and such, cannot be the person who's reviewing it at the end. That's why you have data scientists. That's why you have a data analyst. That's why you have an data engineer. That's why you have an enterprise engineer. Lots of positions in AI. It is a whole nother environment with lots of different positions. So your risk response and mitigation strategies. You're developing your risk plans, response plans. You do avoidance strategies. The only way to actually avoid something is not to do it. The only way that I can avoid my old roof not leaking is to not keep the old roof. The only way I can avoid dealing with environmental and situations in certain countries is to move my operations from that country to avoid it. Risk reduction is what can I do to reduce it? We'll use the roof as an example. I make sure that I have my roof checked yearly. This is just an example. My roof checked each year. I make sure somebody goes up to the roof, make sure that there's no possible holes, nothing coming in. I fix those situations as they're occurring. So that's mitigate reduction. I'm not stopping it, but I am reducing possibility or the likelihood. Risk sharing. You can transfer some of the risk through insurance or partnerships, but you're not transferring all of the risk. Part of it, but you still have responsibility. So for some of these areas, so you still have some of them. So you may have insurance for some of the areas, and that is risk sharing. If this happens, we have car insurance. Well, risk sharing. What if we get in an accident? We have house insurance. We have health insurance. We have life insurance. So risk acceptance. Which risk are you going to accept? Say, all right, we know this company that just said they're going to go first to market. We know if we go first to market, they said it may cost us up to $1 billion in mistakes that we're doing in the process. It may cost us some money afterwards, but we will be first to market. So implementing controls and safeguards. So your policies and procedures, you decide which standards you're using, and your policies and procedures should absolutely be written to those. But you want to make sure that somebody has signed off on those policies. It is a senior person who signs off on that policy. That policy is shared throughout the organization, so everyone knows what's required of them. That is your governance. This is what seniors say you must do. We think you'd like to do. So you must. This is your curfew time. If you're a teenager, you have to be home by such and such time. It is not an option. It is not for discussion. It is a must. Same thing with your policies. Technology solutions. It's implementing advanced technology to strengthen security and operation resiliency. When you're using technology solutions, you have to make sure that they have cyber events in place, that they have cybersecurity. You have to make sure that they have AI, that they're using AI as part of the process. You have to make sure that you have non-disclosures in there, and you have to make sure that they follow your policy. And you want to review their policy if you're using another technology, especially if you're bringing a consultant coming in. Training and awareness. Who's going to do your training? How long are you going to do it for? I often do training for the C staff, CEO, CIO, CTO, CFO, the CAIO, all of these new positions that are out. Everything. CAIO is artificial intelligence officer, new CIAO. So we look at these things. We also look at I've also done training for the boards of directors for organizations and their board of trustees, because they need to understand risk from our point of view. Because they're coming from organizations they've worked for. Board of trustees are not part of your company. They're your board of governance is usually working for other companies. So you want them to understand the risk frameworks you're using with. So I do a lot of work of senior level training. Monitoring effectiveness of your strategies. So you want continuous risk monitoring, adaptive controls, and timely and corrective actions. We discussed that. This is a quick review. So we talked about risk reporting and communications protocols. How do you let everybody know what's going on, including customers if they need to know? We talked about Tylenol, how they let everybody know, including customers. Clear communication channels, what's going for risk reporting and stakeholder engagement. And that's called a RACI diagram. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed. And we to figure those out to decide, well, how do we communicate with each one of those? Regular risk reporting, that might be once a week, it might be once a month, it might be as a situation occurs. So ongoing monitoring and evaluation. We talked about regular risk reviews, making sure that the risk of being and we do performance assessments. We ensure controls measures are effective over time. We can have great control measures, but are they working? Continuous improvement in risk management. We talked about this, incorporating lessons learned. We talked about adopting best practices. We talked about enhancing your adaptability. We spoke about innovation, with risk, when you have new opportunities, there's new risk. When you have operational efficiency, it's streamlining risk processes, improving decision-making. We talked about navigating uncertainty. You're still going into a dynamic market that's constantly changing, and it's a mainly competitive advantage to get there first, but you have a lot of uncertainties. How do you navigate that? And that is becoming a major new business process. First to market was not always part of the things for manufacturing firms. Now it's becoming for a lot of organizations. So lessons learned from risk management failures, common pitfalls from risk, insights from failures. These are things you'll want to find out from your own organization. What failures did we have? How do we deal with it? How do we handle these situations? Find out the history so you don't repeat the history in your organization. There's unique industries have different risk. That's why it's important to belong, I believe, to different industry associations. And so we go to these conferences and such, and you hear about all of the new risk associated with that. Read magazines. There's so many magazines. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly posting articles and such. I post a lot on LinkedIn. ERM solutions must be customized to handle behavior of each sector. And effective risk management improves your overall resilience and performance. That's how you know it's effective. We talked about some lessons from Canada and some. You had the 2016, the Mercury wildfire revealed enterprise risk management gaps. It hampered crisis effects. The financial sector resiliency. You've now had robust frameworks, and financial institutions have helped maintain organizational resiliency during economic turns. You survived COVID in Canada. Value of proactive risk management. These examples demonstrate the need for proactive risk management and continuous improvement. These are things we've learned. Continuous improvement. COVID was an example. I mentioned the banks did very well during COVID, but many restaurants closed, many industries closed. So they did not have a proactive risk management. There was an example of a company that was making pizzas. And what they did was they said, okay, what do? We have all these supplies and nobody's allowed to come into the store. We can't be making them. We can't be doing this. The cost of the ovens alone are going to cost us a fortune. We have all of ours. We can't bring our whole staff in. We can't have people together. What do? They said, we can have, we'll have an ordering line with one person taking that remotely from home. We'll have another one where we'll have people in the store actually making kits. So you want to make a pizza? Great. We have the pre-made dough for you. We have the sauce ready, our sauce, special sauce, love, et cetera, et cetera. So they go through with that. We're almost ready to do the questions. So we have strengthened internal controls, enhanced cybersecurity, and proactive risk identification. So strengthen internal controls, major legal issues to mitigate future risk, finding out what happened. Because you have had in the past, a lot of major legal issues to mitigate future risk. One of the things that happened in Edmonton, Canada, a number of years ago, was every government agency had to be trained and compliant with ISO 2701 from cybersecurity because they saw what was happening in other cities and they did not want to be one of those cities. So they moved into it, they got it. Enhanced cybersecurity. Organizations respond to data breaches by upgrading cybersecurity and prioritizing transparency to rebuild trust. Transparency is required in the AI requirements for Canada. Must be transparent. Proactive risk identification. These cases emphasize the importance of identifying risk early and having robust crisis response plans. I live an hour and a half from the border of Canada. My house is in Rochester, New York, and I'm there within an hour and a half, and it's so I work a lot in Canada. So it's been an interesting thing to see the changes that have occurred over the years, and it's I've worked for many organizations there, including I've worked with KPMG in Canada, and I've worked with other organizations there. So it is a very really constantly improving. I'm going to be speaking at a conference there on at DEMCOM. I'll be speaking there as a speaker on AI risk and how it's affecting organizations when they're doing environmental planning. So a lot of issues around risk are coming up and becoming very important for organizations, but it's growing. We didn't have AI risk 5 years ago. We didn't talk about it. We talked more about different areas. Now it's all it's enterprise wide, everything we're using. So proactive risk identification, comprehensive risk assessment, engagement. Now I'm going to open it for questions. So we did pretty well on timing. So we are at 1:02. And if you're overwhelmed, I know I gave a lot in 1 hour, but I didn't give anything that you don't need to know in that hour. So that's what's important. This is my LinkedIn profile. I do encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can always ask me questions through LinkedIn. I don't like to answer on emails, but I will certainly be available to answer anything you have on in that area. So with that, we can open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That was an insightful. That was an insightful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Please, if you have questions, we can unmute or drop your questions in the chat room, right? Okay, so while we are waiting for the audience to ask their questions, I would quickly like to ask a follow-up questions based on what you said. So right, so risk management is often seen as a compliance exercise, right? But you emphasize resilience. So I would like to ask what are the strategies that leaders need to make to start seeing risk as an opportunity rather than just a threat? I don't know if you got my question. Hello, doctor, can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, you were asking me? I'm sorry. I thought you were asking them for their opinions. I misunderstood.
So, okay. Yeah. I was directing the question to you.
Okay, can you repeat it? Just so I can,
because it was kind of... that's fine. Okay, so what I was asking is, oftentimes risk management is seen as a compliance exercise, right? And during your conversation, you emphasize, resilience. And I would like to ask that what are the strategies, that leaders or key decision makers, can make, right, to start seeing risk as an opportunity rather than just a threat?
Well, first of all, I think that there's like 4 questions there, so I'll take them all. Risk is only insurance if you're dealing with it from a aspect of you're actually sharing it. Otherwise, there's no insurance associated with it. So that's important to know. And people do have cyber insurance, and they're saying, I didn't get paid. Well, because they don't pay if you can't show you did your risk assessment, your impacts, you had strategies, you had implementation in place. So it's a partnership there. But also the opportunities for risk when you're doing a risk assessment is saying where it may have a manufacturing firm that only wants to make 100 widgets a month. That's it. They're happy. But you have to find out what their goals are. And you can find that out for a large organization by reading their They have an annual report every year that comes out for people to be able to invest in stock. And every large organization, if they're being traded, will have that information. So those are easy to work for, because you can find out what their goal, their mission, and their values are. They have to list those three things, at least, and most of them do. So meeting with senior management and saying, what are your goals? What are your values? So if their goal is growth, then that's an opportunity to use the risk assessments for. If their goal is to make sure that they're first to market, then it's important. But if their goal is to just stay consistent and just be happy with what they're doing, they probably won't be in business very long. So I think that most people are goal oriented in business, no matter what size it is. I don't think people are so happy with what they're, better, next, better, improving. Business is there to make money, but also government agencies. I was the CISO for a city. We had 43 agencies, and we had the police department, we had Department of Health, we had the museums, but there was opportunities there for growth, because the zoo brought in money. The science center brings in money. And, where were the risks associated with the police departments? Was we had 3 separate police departments. How do we deal with the opportunities there to be able to work with the communities, to be able to work with them? So all of these were risks that had to be dealt with. That answers your question. So I think that's whether it's being used from a risk opportunity point of view, the opportunity would be, depending on are they happy where they are, or are they looking for growth? And the opportunities don't always exist. We don't always know who our competitors are. We don't always. So that is part of the risk assessment. Do we not know who our competitors are? What markets are we going into? Which markets should we be into? Maybe we're not doing great in our country. Maybe we want to do international. Which country really needs our whatever we're making right now? Who could use this for us here that we hadn't even thought about? Maybe it's a small little country. It's not one of the big European countries, but it might be a small country that says, we need this resource, we need this product. And so that's part of the opportunities, going out and saying, what else is out there? And part of that is, I think that marketing people should be taught in risk management aspects of it. I have an MBA in marketing, and you do learn opportunity growth, but not necessarily the risk with there's risk associated with it. But I think that the marketing teams should also know COSO, the 3100, and be able to utilize that in their marketing aspects to be able to help with opportunities.
Thank you for that. So depending on the insight or appetite that the organizations have towards the risk, that's how you can see it on the lens of as an opportunity. Thank you very much. Please, do we have questions for Doctor? Please, let's ask questions. This is an opportunity to learn from a woman who has over 30 years experience when it comes to risk management.
So, yeah, I don't know if I can ask a question. This is Olakune.
Yes, you can.
Thanks for
You
this
can.
time. Yeah, my question may be a bit practical, because this is a real life scenario. I won't be exact for confidentiality reasons, but I will paraphrase the issue. So, as a management staff or a senior manager in internal control or audit, and you are doing your review, or you identify the risk around a particular.
But which are you? Are you a senior manager or are you an audit? Which one are you doing? Which role?
Yes, I am currently an head of internal audit and control for
internal audit. Okay.
Yes. So, but I left a role for control, head of internal control. Now moved to internal audit again. So I've been dancing around the two roles, internal audit, internal control. So now, the bone of contention, and this has happened in actually when I left my officer role to managerial role. I'm talking about head of department role. Now I move with or relate with top management. One of my concerns has been, at least in different businesses now, is that when you as an internal auditor or head of internal control point out a risk, obvious risk that may impact the business negatively, mostly in terms of cost, and the business leadership. Okay, are you saying something?
Yes, I was going to say, one of the things for internal audit's responsibility is to make sure that you did the risk assessment properly. That's the only part of risk assessment they can go with. They can't evaluate whether your risk are correct or not, but they go through did you do the risk assessment process from an internal audit point of view? But as the senior manager looking at that, then you have to make sure, as a senior manager, I always go through and do my own audit. Am I doing everything the way I should according to the standard? I take the standard and I do a gap assessment against the standard I'm using, whether it's COSO, whether it's 31,000, which one is my, where am I meeting these requirements? Am I not reading those requirements? And I do a gap analysis with that. But internal audit can only assess whether you did it according to the standard. They're not allowed to say whether your risks were evaluated correctly or not.
Yeah, I understand. But my own personal concern, like I said earlier, is that even when you have done your risk assessment and that particular issue is pointing to a risk, part of the risk you have identified in terms of, maybe very high risk, low risk, or medium risk, and this is a very high risk. Take for instance, it can be just customer related risk, and you have pointed it out. That's what I'm saying now. But the management still wants to go ahead, despite the fact that they understand and they agree that this is a risk. So how do you, so the question now is, as an internal auditor or a control or risk manager, how do you go from there? And you still don't want the business to suffer.
Well, if you have the risk identified, I use ISO 3100, would be the 31,000. It actually just gives you the steps to do for each step in there. And so does COSO. They're standardized. So they would use either one of those. The steps are once you've identified the risk, then you have to come up with strategies. You have to mitigate. You have to do a risk assessment on any of the residual risk. It is a whole risk assessment process. And both of those standards will define that pretty clearly if you do a gap assessment on any process at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay, thank you. We have some questions here that people have been writing in, so I'd like to read some of these if we could, because some people wrote these much earlier, so I want to make sure we have a chance to go through them. Somebody said, I've worked mostly in document management.
Yes, ma'am.
And that, okay, right. So what are the risks that can evolve and how can we tackle those applying such more principles? Well, the risks that can define there would be the same as anything else. Whether you're dealing with document management solutions, privacy is a risk, enterprise business continuity is a risk. The in order to be able to go through these questions, I would have to do a formal risk assessment. We wouldn't be able to answer this question without doing a formal risk assessment, probably about a week to go through and do the history and such. So you want to look at the history in there and find out what's in there. And that will give you what those particular risks are. But you also want to do, this is where AI comes in help. If you check with cyber, see if you're allowed to, and ask them, what are histories that other document management solutions have had? What are risks that they've had, things that had, what events did they have? What incidents did they have? And if looking at other people in your industry will definitely help you say, this might happen to us too. And also finding out what they did well. So doing research on history is a great first step, if that makes any help.
Yeah, I understand. And you're right. Because of the document management solution, we deal mostly on the digital formats of the contents, and the most risky factors people should not get, get shared unknowingly to other parties. And the way that you mentioned about the principles and the in-depth knowledge, it was really, really helpful. Thank you.
Great,
thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad you found it helpful.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, it is.
So I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat.
Okay, I'm not sure that there are any more questions in the chat. Does anybody want to unmute and ask questions? I think aside the okay, so one more question from me before we wrap this up. From your experience, ma'am, what would you recommend for an organization? Should they adopt and implement the three risk management, the framework and the international standard, that's COSO, MOR, and 31,000, or what is more effective to just implement or adopt one, or they can apply or implement the three?
Yeah. It's very depending on the maturity level of how advanced their risk assessment processes are. And so if you're just starting out, definitely one is going to be enough. It's kind of like baking 3 cakes at one time. I can't bake a pie, I can't bake a pie, a cake, and a roast beef at the same time in one oven and not get confused on what timings and everything else. It just doesn't happen. You can tell I haven't had lunch yet, so but this is going to food. But the point is, so this is part of the problem. So pick one, and again, it depends on the industry. COSO is used a lot in manufacturing. 3100 is being used more now in manufacturing. Many government agencies are sticking with, or many of the old ones are still using MOR. And so it depends on the industry that you're in and also the culture of the organization. If you're a very structured organization and you're just looking for just the facts, you know, COSO is very good, MOR is very good. But if you want to deal with the governance, risk, and compliance aspects of it also, and include that, all 3 of those in there, then the 3100 is very good to look at. It is a includes, this is what you, the others are checklist, but the 3100 will actually have other associated documents that will help you understand better how to implement. So I like 3100. I find it the easiest to use for most organizations. But again, if it's manufacturing, if it's another area there, and they've been using COSO for a long time or more, you certainly don't want to change that unless you've already got the maturity level in that. You can always add more in once you have your maturity level at a level where you say, okay, we've really got a good control of this, good handle on this. But if you don't have a good handle, and there's maturity models you can look up that you can choose which level you're at. But I personally like 3100, 31,000. I keep saying 100. Good thing I'm not talking about money. I'd be losing money. So, but by the way, there's over 24,000 ISOs, and I am certified in over 30. So both from an audit point of view, and then I got certified also as the implementer. So it's always 60. So it's the numbers kind of roll in my head.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we don't have any more questions. I would like
Great.
to use the opportunity to really thank you for your time and for sharing from your word of experience with us. I'm sure everyone on this call would have seen that risk management isn't just, you know, a framework for compliance exercise, but rather it is a powerful driver of resilience and growth. Okay, so before we wrap this up, kindly fill the attendance sheet on the attendance form on the chat box. We're going to use that to send you your certificate of participation. And please kindly follow our facilitator, Dr. Michael Redmond, on LinkedIn. She's got a lot of resources that you can leverage on and learn from when it comes to information security, when it comes to risk, when it comes to environment and business continuity. Please kindly follow her. Our LinkedIn profile is on the screen, but you can also just type in Michael Redmond, PhD.
No, Michael C. Redmond. Michael Redmond will bring me up. It has to be Michael C. Redmond to pull me up.
Okay. Michael C. Redmond on LinkedIn, and she's very conspicuous to know. Once you see the red hair and a very beautiful skin, you know she's the one.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I sent her a request already.
Okay. As people have started sending you a request, so they're looking forward to your acceptance of the connection request.
Great.
So,
thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. Okay, before we bring this to a close, we did a game at the beginning of the webinar, and we had 3 winners, right? And the free gift is a free course to take, you know, to learn more about risk management according to ISO 31000. Remember that Doctor mentioned that our favorite framework is ISO 31000. So we would like to offer our 3 winners, you know, a foundation course, you know, in partnership with our company, Standards and Best Practice, to offer, you know, foundation course on ISO 31000. So the link will be sent to your email. We usually have webinars, on a monthly basis, and if you enroll, we'll always send you, an email information for our next, webinar series. So once again, I want to appreciate everyone who has, found time to attend today's session. I hope it was very insightful. And as you leave here, I want to encourage you to, reflect on how this frameworks, right, apply to your own organization. Whether you're starting, like she mentioned, you can just start with either of them. You can start with COSO, MOR, or ISO 31,000. And if you've started, if you have implemented any of these, right, whatever your maturity level is, you can add more frameworks to better strengthen the risk culture of your organization. So at Certified JRC, we believe that compliance and risk management should be simple, actionable, and aligned with your strategy. So we look forward to continuing this conversation with you, whether through future webinars, consultations, or by explaining our solutions. We can support you on your risk journey. We're just an email away. So thank you again for joining us today. Please do not forget to fill the attendance form, and you can also follow us on our various social media platforms on LinkedIn and on Instagram, where you can catch up with more information about our webinar series and other resources you can leverage on. So till next time, stay resilient, stay proactive, and let's turn risk into an opportunity. Let's be proactive about, risk when it comes to organization. Thank you very much. Thank you again to our facilitator. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. And Bukola, I also want to say thank you, big thank you to you for reaching out and coming up with this great initiative. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alawaye, for that. That's encouraging. We hope to see you in our next webinar. Yeah, take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you very much for inviting me. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Bye.